Okay, this is Critical Discussions, episode 8. Today is 31st of August 2022, the last day of summer. And this episode is going to be slightly different because today we're not going to cover a lot of news. We're going to cover just two or three actually. And one of them is the fact that Ukraine has started its de-occupation or counteroffensive maneuvers in the south of the country. And right now, Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian army is trying to liberate the city of Kherson, and as well as just the region. And seems like they're doing pretty fine at the moment. However, there's not a lot of news right now, not a lot of information about this counteroffensive operation right now, because Ukrainian army actually asked basically for media, for public to stay slightly silent with the information and not like put too much online basically in the media sphere, not to draw too much attention and not to potentially like straight up giving away crucial necessary information to the Russians. So yeah, but it started a few days ago. I feel like on 29th of August, something like that. And seems like they're doing pretty well. I've seen the news that apparently Ukrainians deoccupied about like 50 little villages, towns, whatever, little yeah villages basically in that region. Not sure how true it is. Once again, this is right now not particularly well known information. So yeah, but they're doing they're finally started this counteroffensive operation, and it seems like it's doing pretty well at the moment, which is really great. I'm really happy to see Ukrainians deoccupying their territory, and this is something that's been needed, I think, for long time, and finally now that they have advanced weapons, more or less advanced weapons, and just in general the fact that they have weapons um, gives them now an opportunity to actually not only defend their positions but also switch to offensive maneuvers. Great for them, really happy. This once again should have happened long time ago, and if the army wouldn't be in such a poor state as it was, yeah, probably would have happened a long time ago. But we've got what we've got, and so yeah, now it's finally started. So this is really big news. Obviously, it's been in the news recently, in the news for the past again like 2-3 days, and yeah, they're basically destroying this Russian army, or like they're splitting it in like 2 or 3 different smaller subdivisions basically, because they're destroying the bridges, destroying ammo depots. They're using very effectively HIMARS systems. They're using very effectively HIMARS system with long range missiles that can go like up to 70 kilometers and whatnot. Very precise and so on and so forth. But also they are using artillery. They're using sort of lesser and older perhaps artillery, but it's needed right now. And apparently United States finally like delivered certain um, certain rockets. For example, like M26, M31 is the very precise rockets for HIMARSs. M26 not as precise, is basically the same as Russians Grad, but it's better than nothing, obviously. And for what they're doing right now, it's pretty good. It's exactly what they need. The fact that they are able to artillery like shell strike the positions of Russians and then start the offensive operation on the ground. It's exactly basically is exactly what's working, exactly what's been needed. So yeah. Um, Once again, not a lot of news so far. We're seeing that we're seeing basically reports that Russians are fleeing. They're not even fighting that much because it's one like when you are basically shelling the cities into oblivion and then you're like entering basically dead city or dead village or whatever, and it's another one when you're being shelled actually, and it's like not a lot of things you can do basically about it, right? Like if your position has become known for some intelligence services, for some just like, I don't know, people spotting you somehow in the distance or something like that, right? Or through satellite imagery, just reconnaissance drone imagery, so on and so forth. Like, yeah, and then your position is known. Maybe you don't know even about it, and then artillery rockets are coming your way. Once again, not a lot you can do about it, and so yeah, you're just running away. Although Putin apparently has um, commanded the military to not give up the positions and actually stay. But obviously, like it's one thing that some cunt in fucking Kremlin says something to you, but when you're on the ground and you're being shelled, like you're gonna run because your like self-preservation instincts will kick in. Hopefully, um, once again, so far the Ukrainian side uh, confirmed two ammo depots being blown up, basically. Some BMP, like machine of infantry machine, some drones, not a lot of things like free tanks, 15 soldiers, not a lot so far, but apparently the advancements are on the way, are like ongoing right now. Once again, I can only congratulate Ukraine with these maneuvers, and I hope they will continue. I hope they will continue, obviously, doing the same even in Donetsk and Lugansk, but obviously right now it's their priorities to actually um, do it in this region, in south of Ukraine, and obviously on the newly occupied basically territories where Russia's control and Russia's sort of grasp on the situation on the ground is not as firm as their presence in Donetsk and Lugansk, because they've been supporting separatists in those regions for like 8 years right now. And so obviously their grasp on situations is in those regions, and their control of those regions is much tighter than again in just like newly established territories, newly captured territories, newly occupied territories. So I can kind of understand obviously the reasoning behind deoccupying first south of Ukraine, and obviously it has to do with access to sea basically, because Ukraine obviously needs to continue exporting grain, needs to continue to have access to their ports, and yeah, it's totally understandable. It's totally understandable, totally sort of justify to start the operations from basically from the south, and once again, like the Antonovsky Most, Antonov Bridge, is being right now basically like shelled and damaged, and I don't think Russians can actually use it, and so they're trying to escape. Obviously, is trying to either leave this territory or maybe they're still fighting for this territory. I'm not like super sure as of the moment, but um, the this basically bridge over Kakhovsky hydroelectric plant also been uh, out of order, basically out of use right now, because it's been also shelled very precisely, very accurately, as to not damage the dam basically, because there's a dam there, um, but to order it useless for Russian military, and thus yeah, basically they're trying to split. about like 20,000, I think the state, in 25,000 Russian army in that region. They're trying to split it into several different basically pieces, and then try to deoccupy this territory and get them out of Kherson, out of Zaporozhye region, so on and so forth. Which is great. Once again, I feel like they are probably thinking about Crimea as well. I'm just like not sure how it's gonna happen right now, in the sense of, are they gonna try to deoccupy Crimea right now as well? 'Cause Crimea is quite big, and it would be interesting to see what's the plan basically for Ukrainians in the upcoming weeks and months. Will they go to Melitopol and Mariupol? Will they try to basically free all the territory of Azov Sea basically, or will they also incorporate sort of advancements to Crimea? Because they're bombing, they're attacking Crimea's key Russian infrastructure and Russian positions in Crimea right now already. So it would be really interesting to once again to see how it's gonna unfold in the upcoming weeks and months. But yeah, this is the main kind of piece of news for today: the fact that this operation has started. But because it's just so like very recent, and once again because Ukraine asked the media to stay kind of radio silent to a degree, you can't like there's not a lot of information at the moment. Um, so yeah, we're gonna see, I guess, in the next like episode, more information about this particular situation, this particular counter-offensive operation, and so far it's been quite successful as far as we can see, as far as the information that reaches the public basically. I mean, obviously, like Ukraine would do that. Maybe like Russia would actually claim that it's not successful, which like anything that comes from like Russian propagandist mouths or Russian officials, you can just discard basically instantly, because they never ever say anything that's even remotely sort of coherent and remotely true. So it's like whatever you say, dude, just fuck off. You said something, whatever. Like there's no even you shouldn't even bother listening to what Russia's officials or once again state media propagandists are saying right now, because it's all lies. It's all lies, it's all hatred, it's all just a bunch of fucking nonsense. All right then. So this is big news number 1, and yeah. One more piece of news that is sort of about this counteroffensive operation, but also about Russia basically in general, and Russia's state of armies, state of military, which is 5 things. The Insider has made basically a little kind of investigation, which the title of investigation is "Goodbye Arms" or "Goodbye Arms," basically "Goodbye Weapons." And is it a farewell to arms? It's actually in English. I'm gonna include the link into description, into everywhere that I can. But basically, the state of military industrial complex right now in Russia is quite abysmal, and they are not covering the losses in weapons, in ammunition, for example, and so on and so forth. And so there's been sort of estimations that by the end of this year, Russia might be out of a lot of weaponry and a lot of ammunition, because right now they're using up to 400 or even 50,000 ammunition of all types in a day, and that's and that's like a lot. That's like really a lot. Um, very interesting. Something very interesting is regarding the high precision weapons, which is being counted not in like thousands but in like hundreds, and they've been Russia has been firing a lot of them already. That's why like right now basically we don't see that many big sort of strikes like with really powerful warheads basically, because Russia simply does not have a lot of them left. I'm going to include once again the link to this article because it's worth reading. I think um, it's really worth reading because basically like um, the in 2014, since the invasion basically of Crimea, Russia was sort of restoring or restoring their old sort of munitions missiles at a rate about 500 per year, 570,000 per year. But once again, if you are using, let's say, like 50,000 per day, like you can quickly sort of understand that these things are running out quickly in Russia quickly, and the factories are simply not really producing enough of them, not restoring enough of them from restoring based from like USSR based basically weapons. Um, yeah. For example, so yeah, this article talks about uh, service life of like tank barrels. So like one thing is thinking simply about the amount of ammunition, but the other thing is to think about the service life of like engines in tanks, in airplanes, so on and so forth, right? In some sort of like infantry vehicles. And service life again of a barrel can be like 210 rounds or 800 rounds with high explosive, whatever. And maybe you can extend it like even up to 2000, but eventually it will break down, and you're gonna be replacing it. You're gonna be those weaponry will be in need of service. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. And Russian military industry factories, they are not prepared to basically restore or create new parts basically, or new just the whole new like tanks and so on and so forth at the rate that this war basically requires. So yeah. And Russia's started basically using uh, their anti missile system, their defensive systems like S-300 and S-400 defense air missile systems. They started using it to basically strike the Ukrainian cities indiscriminately, just basically strike onto a city. Wherever it lands there more or less. It's gonna kill civilians. Fuck it. That's the position of Russia, and they don't really care. But once again, even why they're doing it, because they're lacking high precision weaponry, but also they're just again indiscriminately killing civilians because they don't care. They want to instill fear and terror. Um, yeah, to somehow force Ukrainian to give up, like which is after 6 months of war. Um, like obviously nobody will ever do it ever again. Not again ever. There's just no Ukrainian will ever do it. Um, yeah, not not after all that's been seen, all the crimes that's Russian army committed in Ukraine. So yeah, that's just like one part. There's like a because of sanctions, they don't have access to certain equipment necessary, for example, to even produce certain things, because that's been basically the main sort of the main sort of big thing in the sanctions, cutting off access to certain machinery, to certain equipment and tools, because surprise, surprise, Russia does not produce a lot of, or Russia doesn't produce basically any big machinery, big equipment that's used to, for example, even create those shells, the ammunition, so on and so forth. They've been buying those things like from like Germany or Austria or something like that, for example. And once again, it's all in this article by the Insider. So I like definitely recommend reading it because it will open your eyes onto a lot of things basically. And yeah, the production of missiles, like long range missiles, or like almost like, though they're not ballistic missiles, but or actually, yeah, some of them are ballistic missiles actually. The production is like 50 units per year, which is like, that's why once again, like, Russia doesn't use that many of those missiles to strike. It's just simply because they don't have. It's not because they don't want like Ukrainian civilians to die or something like that. No, it's because they don't have a lot of them. And yeah, problems. Obviously, Russia has problems with like tanks, armor vehicles, infantry vehicles, so on and so forth. Um, Once again, engine run times. You need services. You need maintenance, and it's not being done really, or it's not being done. It's not like the this equipment is not being rotated in and out of the conflict zones, something like that, or it's not being like repaired somewhere in the fields and the spots. So yeah, same with aviation really. Um, Things are gonna be breaking down. Things are gonna be shut down by Ukraine, by their anti aircraft systems, so on and so forth. Yeah, and Russia is losing even like the fighter jets, their aircraft, helicopters, and they're not producing really a lot of them. It's like 30 per year, maybe, and that's been before sanctions. And now I'm assuming it's going to be even harder because probably some components will be really hard to get access to. I'm assuming. I'm not sure if the whole industrial complex produces like all the bits of pieces of electronics and so on and so forth, all by themselves. I mean, kudos to them that they do. I mean, kudos. I don't know. Don't want to kudos to any Russian thing, but if they produce things by themselves, then I guess they will feel less of an impact. But if there's like any components, especially from like Europe, United States, and so on and so forth, those decent democratic countries, right? Then it's going to be really hard for them to actually just even continue, not even to scale the production, but just to continue the production. So yeah, I suggest anybody interested in this to actually read it. Once again, it's translated into English language, so it's going to be easy for you. Okay. And now then, the second news of the day. The second news of the day is, and the main basically news of the day, is the fact that Mikhail Gorbachev, Soviet leader, died today, apparently. Why I wanted to talk about it? Well, apparently he died yesterday, actually. Okay. If we to believe Wikipedia. But in the news, it's been today. Basically, I think he was in hospital in the past like weeks or even months, probably. So it is in the news today, basically. Well, actually, wait. Actually, while we're here on the topic still of Russian invasion and everything like that, I just wanted to acknowledge this little video. Perfect. It's been posted by Ilya Ponomarenko on Twitter. Perfect illustration of what today's Russia is. Well, I would say what this whole Kremlin aggression, Putin's aggression is. It's basically a Russian flag. Oh my god! It's basically Russian flag being installed on absolute rubbles of the city of Mariupol. Um, Everything is destroyed. Everything is looking. Yeah, it's just like it's total destruction. And then there's a Russian flag waving around total destruction. That's Russian army. That's Russia brought onto Ukraine, onto those many cities. This is example of one city, obviously, of Mariupol, but yeah, this is just tragic, but also once again symbolizes exactly what Russia is like. Yeah, Russian flag waving, surrounded by total destruction. Very tragic, to be honest. Very tragic. But yeah, so let's now continue with our second news of the day. Is the fact that, like I've said, Mikhail Gorbachev, leader of the Soviet Union, last leader of the Soviet Union, has died. Quite a controversial figure in terms of how he's viewed in the West, in like United States or Western Europe, versus how he's seen in Eastern Europe, versus how he's seen in ex-USSR countries, specifically like in Russia or Belarus, for example. Can't speak too much for Ukraine because I haven't spoken with Ukrainian people about their views on Gorbachev. But the fact that he is so sort of controversial, first of all, in Russia, basically people who, like my parents, for example, they blame Gorbachev basically for a collapse of USSR. That's their position basically. They grew up. Well, they didn't grow up. They went through total collapse of the country that they were led to believe this really giant, great, amazing country that's gonna be like, or that is a dominant country, like number one or two in the world. Blah blah blah. All this nonsense. And then suddenly, when when they're like in their like 30s, so like right like middle age, basically your life is kind of just like beginning. Basically you're earning good money, you're doing more or less well, or you're just like earning money, you're living on your own, like you're doing jobs, you're trying to enjoy uh, life and so on and so forth. And then boom, suddenly everything collapses. And because he's at the head of the state at that time, he's the one to blame, which is really absurd, in my opinion, because the things that he's done for, first of all, for humanity as a whole, is nothing sort of a miracle in some way. I mean, he was a product of his system. I'm gonna talk about it slightly a little bit later. So we shouldn't like people shouldn't just like praise him, or people shouldn't just criticize him, because none of the positions is actually reasonable, to be honest. But the fact that, like, just imagine it, right? Like in USSR, there was no private property. You could not do business. You couldn't be like entrepreneur. No freedom of speech of any kind. Censorship, like this is just a standard practice, basically. This dude, I mean, maybe he tried to preserve Soviet Union by like giving people, or like thinking that if he will give people certain liberties, certain freedoms, it's gonna somehow like prolong prolong the USSR. Maybe, I'm not totally sure like what was his reasoning exactly, but he did it regardless. Perestroika, glasnost, all this, those are the terms that even I'm assuming Western people know or like heard of at least. Um, which is like you cannot like understate those. These are crucial things. Like obviously, right now you can see that Russia has become once again a totalitarian dictatorship shithole. The same can be said about many other actually states, ex-USSR states. The same can be stated about Belarus, for example. It's also dictatorship, fucking nightmare. So in the end, it's all been for nothing. If we kind of sum it up, and the man has seen transition from USSR collapse and first of all from USSR being this closed off country and from being this sort of once again authoritarian communist, quite dystopia to be honest, because if we compare the standards of living like 1980s for example in United States and in USSR, and for example what type of things could a worker, like a regular worker in like I don't know freaking Ford factory could buy in 1980s in United States, and what he had or they had in their kitchen, for example, versus what Russians or USSR Soviet people at the time had in their kitchens or in their houses in general, things that they could buy. It's night and day. It's night and day, and it's not even like comparable. People in the United States would have like 150 square meters on average, basically the houses. In Soviets, it would be like 40 square meters, little two or like like 2-room apartment, not 2-bedroom apartment, 2-room apartment, kitchen, 2 rooms, bathroom, no access. You could not buy a car even if you had a lot of money in USSR 80s whatever. To buy a car you had to either kind of bribe somebody or be high up some official or have some connections, because the country didn't produce mass market products basically for their people. It was all about, or mostly was about, this like Cold War, producing arms. That's why like still Russia till this day, 30 years later, they still right now in Ukraine using old Soviet tanks. Why? Because they've produced so many of them. Obviously, and that's why when I'm like talking to people of older generation in Belarus or in Russia, wherever, and they blame Gorbachev for perestroika, for all of this, for collapsing Soviet Union, I'm like, dude, like, have you read even like a Wikipedia article about USSR? Like, I understand that people like have this really weird, sort of mindfuckery that because it was their past, right? Because it was their youth, for example, right? It's a psychological, obviously, trickery of the brain to see it that way. Like everything was greener back then, but back when I was younger, and life was full of potential, basically, and then everything got fucked up as it essentially, eventually does. But just to like not even acknowledge the fact that I mean, like talking, if I would be talking like to older people, right, like, or even like my parents, so like you've been there, like you've seen that shit, like when you tried to sell like a pair of jeans out of your bag, basically like in some kind of a undercover way kind of a scenario, like you've been even caught doing so by police because it was prohibited. Like how can this be a good society when you are not allowed to make your own money by ways that you can do it, like how you see fit? Like the only way to make money is to work for some giant national factory, governmental owned factory, something like how is that a good society? And this man tried to, like, obviously, once again, I cannot claim that that I know about what was in his mind and so and so on. But the fact that this policy of glasnost, once again, free speech and freedom of press, and also um, switching from like planned economy to market-based economy, perestroika, restructuring of the system. Like things needed to change, but things needed to change 10, 15 years before him, before when it was done. Um, like it should have been done a long time ago, and to blame this man for once again for collapse, like this is so weird. This is so weird and fucked up how some people um, don't see what he's done, and especially because some people don't even think about the fact that he basically ended a Cold War and limited nuclear weapons, destroyed a lot of nuclear weapons, and for this thing alone, he should be like at least not hated. Just the fact that he recognized that this Cold War can lead into disastrous results, and the state of the rising tensions could lead to absolute disaster and catastrophe for the whole world. For this fact alone, he should be at least like mildly admired, if nothing else. I mean, surely, once again, he had his problems, but that's what I'm saying. Like, he was a part of the system and he was a man of his time. It's kind of weird and a man of his own upbringing, right? Like, you can't just expect somebody from like in the 1980s to do the same decisions as somebody in 2020 would do. The culture has changed, the world has changed, our perception of certain things has changed. And so the man was the man of his time. And so obviously that's why I wanted to bring it up and sort of put this whole episode basically around his death, because I was reading Twitter today and there's been two views on him. Once again, I'm saying like or actually free, but since I was using reading Twitter in English, two views on him. One is from Baltic states that were occupied by USSR, and this is basically how like the East-West divide, basically East-West in Europe even, or like Western, like I said, like Western Europe, UK, United States versus Eastern Europe. Mikhail Gorbachev was a trusted, respected leader, played a crucial role to end Cold War and bring down the Iron Curtain. It opened way for a free Europe. The legacy of one will not be forgotten. This is by Ursula von der Leyen, and another one, Gabrielius Landsbergis. Lithuanians will not glorify Gorbachev. We will never forget the simple fact that his army murdered civilians to prolong his regime's occupation of our country. His soldiers fired on our unarmed protesters and crushed them under his tanks. This is how we will remember him. And just to clarify, like, nothing good about this, obviously, but during those protests and during that, he tried to prolong. Like, he didn't want USSR to die. He probably wanted it to transform, I guess, into something different. But 15 people died under those like squashing of those protests. 15. How many people could have died if the arms race and nuclear race would have continued and continued and continued? And also think about it, like, if instead of Gorbachev at his place at that time would be someone like Putin, for example. Can you just imagine how much more brutal that whole situation would have been? How much more blood would have been spilled? Do you think someone like Putin would actually allow 15 people to be killed and then call it a day? That's it? Like every life is absolutely sacred. This is a paramount of, should be at least, in my view, it is the paramount sort of value, actually, just the life of a human being. So any life just ended, killed, especially when it's about like giant country tries to suppress just a regular human being, or in this case human beings who gathered to protest a state, or in this case occupation of their country. This is absolutely unjustifiable in my view. However, there are different sort of tiers, and tiers of goodness, of evil, of anything really, right? And so if on one hand the guy denuclearized to a large extent Russia and stopped this escalation war with United States, once again the fall of Berlin Wall, the those reforms that he's tried to, well, he implemented, some successful, some less so successful, and as we're seeing right now, Russia and Belarus, they haven't really transitioned fully from this autocratic, power hungry states, basically, right? But again, on one hand there's evil that's done by him, on the other hand there's positive things that he's done. I feel like, and again, being the product of his own system, right? He's been brought up in USSR, right? So like the fact that he even had those ideas and opinions of the world, right? Way more democratic than anything else seen before or even after him. Seriously. Like, just think about it. Like, for a Communist Party member to think that you need freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of like elections, basically, all those things, just to like, you have to understand that if you are being brought up in an environment that is absolutely antithesis to all those things that you later will implement, or at least like try to implement successfully, more so, less so, doesn't matter, but just the fact that you even have those ideas, that's already an accomplishment. It is right now so easy to forget that it's 1980s, 1970s. There's no internet, there's no like free access to information from across the world on the palm of your hand at all the times. And it's like, how, like, there's no ability to like fact check things quickly, right? Like, it's so like easy to forget all those things right now, right? Like, because right now somebody says something, you spend 2 seconds, you fact check it with the internet, you boom, you're a smart ass, right? Back then, to educate yourself, to even see like the humanity as a whole, basically, versus rather than like we versus them kind of a scenario. Again, this whole Cold War scenario versus United States. Like, to even see the necessity to end this is remarkable in and of itself. Remarkable, I think. And once again, people just don't think that he is not a person living right now. He was a person living back then, and he had those views, and he, in the Communist Party, with this whole giant communistic apparatus, he was still able to implement at least certain changes. Just people don't really like, they're just taking this approach, or like he tried to basically suppress the protests in Tbilisi, Vilnius, Riga, Almaty, Baku, and also Chernobyl also, not apparently, obviously, happened on his watch. But once again. I feel like the goods he's done, the things he's done, outweigh the bad ones, in my opinion, anyway. In my opinion. But this view of Sergei Sumlenny, Berlin-based Eastern Europe expert, so-called, he was a criminal who ordered to violently suppress peaceful protests in Riga, Vilnius again, and other cities. He was cheered in the West because the West did not care about dead Kazakhs or Lithuanians. It's a pity he was never tried in court. This is so brain dead. This is so brain dead. And he compares Gorbachev. The Western fascination by Gorbachev reminds me of the fascination by Pinochet one can witness in some post-Soviet countries, a totally fake image based on whitewashing of bloody regimes. I mean, to some degree, he's not wrong, but at the same time, when right now some peaceful protest happen, or maybe less so peaceful protest, but protest happens somewhere in United States or in France or in Germany, and when police, for example, uses like force, basically, either with water jets or with rubber bullets, so on and so forth, like, will those people be tried? Will those prime ministers or presidents will be tried for that kind of thing, with that dealing with protesters? Not really. It's happening across the whole world forever, been happening, and yeah, it's the state. It's the state of affairs, and it is this just the situation, like individual versus the state. I would always side with an individual. I think, once again, one individual is the paramount value in this whole universe. Life of a person and just his or hers ability to express themselves in any way they want, so far as they're like not hurting other people, obviously, or not like destroying other people's property, obvious things. And so if people want to protest, go and protest. If there is a protest, then probably something is going wrong, and you should kind of take a look at what is being protested. But this position of this so-called expert, Eastern Europe expert, is just, what kind of fucking expert would say that and not mention other good things that the guy has done? Just the shit Kant is doing for clicks, for likes and retweets. Certain deaths. Once again, dear people of the West, Regina Bauer, Petit Michel on Twitter. Wow, what a name. Dear people in the West, Gorbachev was not a peacebringer. Quieted down Chernobyl disasters, sent tanks against armed civilians in occupied republics, 13 dead. Now in 2014, celebrated Crimea annexation, which is, once again, it tells you slightly a little bit more about about him as a person. But when you're like 80, people for some reason become senile and stupid. He didn't cheer. This lady does not mention that he didn't cheer for Putin really, at least when it was like mid-days, basically mid like 2000s. At the beginning, he was all right with Putin, but later, not really. Where I want to find, I want to go basically through certain points in his, well, not his biography, but basically his views on certain events. So let's just start with Chechen wars, right? Like, Russia fought 2 Chechen wars, and Gorbachev was against this, and he was criticizing Boris Yeltsin for this. And actually, he was saying that he was regretting the fact that he was not able to um, quiet down Yeltsin, or make sure that basically he wouldn't be in power in Russia, stuff like that. And yeah, that's like one thing. And he was even saying in 2003 that Gorbachev was saying that he wouldn't even shake hand of Yeltsin. He never spoke and never seen him since December of 1991. That's respectable, right here, right there. So that was 2003, like I'm saying. Then later in 10 years, he will show certain really stupid shit. But yeah, in 2002, he apparently he had seen Putin and he was sort of all right with him. He didn't see problems, although even back then you could have probably noticed already problems. But in 2008, he was saying that Russian voting system basically needs reformations, needs change, and the election process is not all right. And he was also talking about Putin and Medvedev tandem and this fucking switcheroo that they've done. And he was also saying that I'm ashamed. Um, I'm ashamed for them. I'm ashamed in general, and they basically they're not even thinking about the society as if the society does not exist. It's like they've become this rulers, the saviors of the motherland, and I don't like it. That's his words. And where are we 140 million people? Where are we? I don't like it. That's his words. Like that's already quite commendable. Yeah, sure. Once again, later he will. Yeah, unfortunately, I just don't get like Russians and just some people's obsession with Crimea being Russian somehow, and this old shit that every person that's obsessed with Crimea being Russian retells over and over again that drunk fucking or whoever it was, Khrushchev or wherever, gifted it to Ukraine and it should have been Russia's territory all along. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? It's been like that for years, decades. Like, why do you fucking care? If you were not in war with Russia that you started in 2014, you could fucking visit Crimea, no fucking problem whatsoever. Like, if you like Crimea so much. Plus, Russia has their own Sochi, Krasnodar. Like, what's the fucking problem with? It's the same Black Sea. You don't like Ukraine so much that you think Ukraine's territory should be part of Russia somehow because of some old shit that you've never even been around to catch that moment when somehow Crimea stopped being Russian territory, or it was never Russian territory. Let's put it that way. First of all, it's been USSR back then. But like, why the fuck do you care and obsess so much? So whatever. Apparently, about the Crimea, that Gorbachev said that he's approving that because people, Crimeans, voted yes, which is like, dude, are you following? I mean, it's 2014. How old would he be in 2014? Um, when was he born? When was he born? He was born in 1931, right? 1931. He was 83 at the time when he was saying that he's approving that kind of a shit, which is again, yeah, old age should not excuse you from being stupid. Should not. But at the same time, he was 83, for fuck's sake. Um, Yeah. Which is, once again, I don't understand people's obsession with Crimea. I mean, when I was a kid, I've been in Crimea many times, or even like youth, whatever, basically before the annexation. I was in Crimea many times. No disrespect to Crimeans, but it ain't that fucking good. It's like, you know, it's like bare minimum kind of shit. Not particularly great. Like, I mean, granted, I've never spent like hundreds or thousands of dollars to for like a night stay or something like that. We've been always kind of traveling cheap. And that's why people actually went to Crimea versus something like Bulgaria or wherever, Italy, France, whatever the fuck, right? Because it was relatively cheap. You could see also the sea. That's it. But the service was never really that great. Once again, the apartments or like little huts were always kind of cheap and shit, kind of looking, and inside also sort of decrepit and just. I mean, it's not that great. So like this whole fucking obsession with Crimea is like I don't get it. Really don't get it. Just from this perspective of like, it's not even that fucking amazing. So it's like this is not like fucking Nice in France or whatever or some whatever, like top block or fucking Cyprus. I don't know. Insert your own great destination. Um. So yeah, whatever. But the fact that this guy at 83 already kind of lost his mind, like people voted unilaterally yes for reconnection basically with Russia. Like, what are you fucking smoking, dude? When people with guns come to your house and say, "Do you want us to take your house?" Oh, you said yes? We heard that correctly. Okay, good. Like, what are you expected to do? You say no, you got shot, you getting shot, and then they still take what they wanted to take. The fact that he said this, like, very brain dead, very brain dead. Um, so yeah, basically, when once he started to get old, apparently some of the thing, or maybe it was always in his mind and in like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, yeah, this is like one thing that is quite appalling, to be honest. But once again, I this should not be the other thing that he's done should not be understated. But yeah, the Chernobyl disaster is obviously well, it's a disaster, and the coverage, or not coverage, cover up of it was despicable, really despicable. um I don't know how much he knew himself. I did not read about it like today to like refresh my memory in a way. But because you must understand, right? Like people, Western people should understand that if we are talking about autocracies or dictatorship countries or some countries that resemble that, and listen, communistic countries with this like whole apparatus of this whole machinery that's that's created this like hierarchies in the sense that your boss can like almost like can toy with you in a sense, like ruin your life completely or not. Like you're gonna be very careful to what you sending up the ladder, the information you're sending up the ladder. You can see it right now in Russia because frankly, unfortunately, and this is one unfortunate thing that those Gorbachev reforms did not do, they didn't really reform it. Because all those people, all those cunts who were in power back then, or who were like on the rise, or whose lives were kind of, not destroyed, but like shaken, let's put it that way, during this whole collapse of Soviet Union, they they held that disgruntlement, I guess, like the just they held this the resentment, I guess, like Putin. And he created basically his own version of USSR. And so once again, what I'm trying to say is that when you're creating this like vertical hierarchy, when the person on top can fire, not only fire you, but probably like put you in jail with some fabricated case or something like that, that creates really unhealthy dynamics. And so what you will report to your, say, like, managers on top, managers is such a Western world, to people on top of you, will always be skewed towards, oh, everything is great, everything's amazing. So I'm not sure like how well aware was Gorbachev of what was going on, because once again, I haven't read exactly like what was happening during that time and how much he knew and so on and so forth. And also, let's not forget that Chernobyl is Ukrainian territory. So people right now saying that Gorbachev covered up Chernobyl basically, and ordered the parade on like 1st of May, which is like I guess International Labor Day or something like that. Which, I mean, it is Labor Day definitely here. I don't know how much of international it is. He ordered to still have this parade and like pretend like nothing is happening, so on and so forth, which is despicable, and like it's really despicable. But yeah, so like once again, I'm not sure how much he actually knew, how well aware he was, because I could easily see the situation when people on the bottom reported perhaps everything correctly, like people on the ground basically reported everything how it's been basically, even though like a lot of them in the first days even didn't really understand like the scale of the tragedy. But then higher ups who either oversee the people because of whom actually Chernobyl disaster happened, or their higher ups, whatever, they probably didn't want, or I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I haven't researched it prior to this episode, so forgive me, please, for just like going on rants. But I can totally see that person does not want to report exactly what happened to a higher up in like Communist Party or something like that, because that could come with a lot of wrath onto them. And once again, it could end up in some jail times and so on and so forth. So I could totally see how cover up might have been happening already on the way to the top of the top. Because, like I said, this is exactly what's happened in Russia right now before this invasion. People like the smaller officers, bureaucrats in army who were stealing whatever they can and selling shit and earning that way money for themselves. They were reporting on papers that everything is alright to higher up, to their higher up, and then their higher ups were reporting to their higher ups, and those higher ups were reporting to Kremlin. And the Kremlin was fucking reporting to Putin himself, right? And so this kind of, through this chain of broken telephone, Putin might have had an idea he definitely had an idea that the army is in completely different state that it actually was. Because you need to remember also, we're talking about fucking Russia, and it's been documented case from freaking hundreds from Russian Empire states. Potemkinskaya деревня, Potemkin village. That's the term that's been invented not today and not yesterday. Like literally before some higher up visits some factory, city, wherever, everything is renovated, everything is polished, everything looks fancy, new, shiny, amazing. That's just a facade. If you come any other day, or if you actually take a look behind the facade, you see the total destruction, chaos, and just the whole shittery of the situation. So I can definitely see that he might have not been like properly instructed on just the scale of the disaster. I'm not sure, once again. But to simply hate him for this, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can just simply hate him for ordering this parade on 1st of May and so on and so forth. I don't know. Perhaps perhaps like, I don't know, like the meteorologist or somebody like that group said that, okay, the wind is not blowing in the direction of Kiev or something like that, and it wouldn't be that devastating to actually like go through all of this, because obviously like you could also see it. I mean, one thing is a cover up, yes, of course. Let's pretend that nothing. And this is once again to the discussion of he was a product of the time, of the system that's where he grew up and that's brought him. Um, this whole save your face kind of a thing, kind of a scenario, is absolutely prevalent in USSR, was prevalent in USSR, and is still very much so present in Russia. And as I'm watching and I'm reading about China, it is very much present in China. Admitting to your own mistakes is a sign of weakness. Apologizing for anything is a sign of weakness. Actually fixing your own shit, this is like, wow, what the fuck we even talking about. So the fact that he would want to save the face of wherever United USSR, once again, product of the system, I can totally see it. Is it good? Not at all. Obviously, you must be able to admit to your own faults, especially when it's a fucking nuclear disaster and it affects not only you and not only your country, but even neighboring countries. So, especially when it's like so dangerous, right? And approximately 70% of that radionuclear waste landed in Belarus, and I know it basically firsthand because I grew up and I live in the southeastern southeastern part of Belarus, exactly basically the territory that received, or not exactly, but basically the territory of Belarus that received most of this nuclear waste, nuclear fallout, I guess, contaminants, so on and so forth. And as I was growing up, like my parents were advised, and I was taking like iodine, for example, to make sure that my what's the word, thyroid gland would work properly, and so on and so forth. So I know, like from first-hand experience, that it's not all fun and dandy. Nothing fun about it at all. Thyroid cancer is and was like, maybe not cancer, but some problems with thyroids were a problem for quite a lot of people in my region, in Gomel region of Belarus. So yeah, nothing fun about it, nothing good about it. But once again, when you weigh on scales the good he's done and the bad he's done, I think Gorbachev should be remembered once again as a good leader. Even despite the fact that, yeah, his later remarks about the annexation of Crimea, not particularly great. Not particularly great. Once again, I'm not sure if he really wanted if he really wanted to kind of transform USSR, or was he just trying to like adapt as it went, to just like prevent it from collapsing, basically. And all those measures were almost accidental in a way. I can't say. I haven't studied him that well. I haven't read about him enough to actually, or haven't watched like his interviews and so on and so forth enough to know that the answer. And I think I'm gonna do it in like in the future. Maybe we'll try to read and watch a little bit more about him. But I don't think it is justifiable that people from like Baltic states or so-called fucking Eastern European experts, for fuck's sake. Give me a fucking break. Expert. Um, just call him, yeah, despicable murderer and so on and so forth. I think it is so disrespectful and missing so many points. And very interesting video I've seen on Deutsche Welle. They've asked people on the streets, I don't know on the streets of which city, but in Germany, asked what they think about Gorbachev. But interestingly, like a lot of those people were older, from ranging anywhere from like 45 to like 70. There were like few people. I mean, and also I don't know obviously how many people they've asked that gave them different kind of answers that maybe wouldn't like fit Deutsche Welle's kind of, I guess, agenda, if they're pursuing any agenda with this video. But all of them, I'm not even kidding, all of them in that video unanimously basically said that they think of him very well and like very kindly, and like the Germany as they see it right now, right here, wouldn't be the Germany that they see it right now, because he helped to he helped reunify, I guess, right, the reunification of two Germanys, and they see him as a good. And also we had Saint Just Germany saying hi in the chat. I'm sorry, I've noticed it just right now, but it's kind of interesting that I'm talking about Germany and I see Saint Just Germany in the Twitch chat. I'm wondering, I don't know if you're watching still right now, but, and also by the way, thank you for following. If you're still watching, I wonder, if you're from Germany, how do you see Gorbachev? And if you've talked about him with whatever friends and family, how do they see him? Because it's so interesting that in Germany it's like again, based on this video, unanimously as a good person. It's really interesting. Yeah. Okay, I feel like that's actually, I wanted to make today's episode rather short, and I wanted to talk about these two topics, and especially about Gorbachev, because yeah, I just think it's so unfair. First of all, so basically like he's more hated than he's loved, at least in Russian speaking, or well, yeah, at least in Russian speaking world. It is so interesting. So interesting. So interesting. Just the fact that he was able to push this glasnost reform, openness, or like I mean, right now it's all being ripped away. It's all being destroyed. And that's why I feel like this is so, like, he died at the age of 91. I feel like this is so probably, it was probably so frustrating for him to see just into what kind of state Russia has turned, what kind of a country Russia has become. And the fact that his main things that he pushed, they're basically destroyed right now, because freedom of speech is non-existent, not in Belarus, not in Russia, to a degree even not in Ukraine, because listen, to a degree even not anywhere in the world, but obviously definitely not in Russia, not in Belarus. So that's been destroyed, and this is one of the most important things. I mean, 1984 is about this, like one of the greatest dystopian books of the century, of many centuries probably, is about the language, is about the fact that you must be able to say anything openly and freely without being feared of prosecution. And you cannot do it anymore right now in Belarus or in Russia. They're banning websites, they're banning media, they're jailing people for posts in VK, in Facebook, whatever, in Twitter. That is not great. That is the death of society. And so for him, for Gorbachev, to actually see his own creation basically, his own creation basically falling apart like that, I don't know. I feel like it must be so painful. And probably like I don't know, once again, I haven't seen too many interviews with him, but if I were him and I knew that this is my legacy, like those terms people know even on the West, perestroika, glasnost, and I've tried to do it, I have done it, but then people are blaming me for all the shit that's been accumulating in USSR from years and years and years prior. And then my main creations are being totally demolished and destroyed in later years of Russia, of Belarus, and those countries are just turning into dictatorship states. Damn, I don't know. Like, I would blame myself a lot on not doing enough, not actually doing enough, to actually truly transform the country. Because what, like I've said before, like those people who were like sort of on the rise or working apparatchika, as there's this term, like basically bureaucrats, they've seen this collapse of USSR and then they decided to recreate it. Putin, Lukashenko, those cons, but recreate it around themselves basically. This is just so, yeah. I feel like if I would be Gorbachev, I would be thinking like, fuck me, I haven't done enough. And unfortunately, the transformation has never actually occurred, finalized, actually happened. Like true transformation from being this um, totalitarian state into a truly democratic state, which is true. It like there were things in Russia that were happening in early 2000s. They had a chance, but they got Putin. And once again, it's a product of a system. Instead of like new wave of good oppositionists, I guess, kind of people, democratic leaning, so on and so forth. Like they just got someone put in place. I mean, it's in his name, Putin, right? Put in. It's like this fucking. Sometimes I just feel like I'm living in a simulation because Putin was literally put in place by Yeltsin. He was not elected leader. Nobody elected him. Can you just imagine? Can you just stop for a second and think about this fact that Putin, whatever is running this simulation, this AI, whatever created this world, it's like so blatant. It's so like on the nose. It's funny sometimes, but Putin was put in place by Yeltsin, never elected, and that's what's happened 20 years later. The country that Gorbachev tried to preserve, I guess, but to put on like on those rails of democracy and freedom, it's been derailed. It's been derailed. Really sad. Really, truly, truly sad. But yeah, not much else to talk about it. I think he deserves more praise than hatred for sure. It's really disheartening to see the way he's been viewed in post USSR, ex USSR countries, on at least like from the people that I've talked and I don't have like intelligentsia kind of people surrounding me, fortunately or unfortunately. So maybe in certain families he would be viewed, or he was viewed, or he is viewed in a very positive light. Unfortunately, like my family and people that I have spoken, older people that I have spoken with, they all view basically him as this villain uh, who broke apart Soviet Union, this mighty Soviet Union that couldn't even create fucking toasters and dishwashers and fucking cars. Fuck everything about that country. Yeah. Once again, rest in peace, Gorbachev. I think for the humanity, you've done a lot, and yeah, it's really unfortunate to see some people. Some people really having a wrong opinion, in my view, on him. Okay, I think I'm gonna end it here. I hope you have a good day, and yeah, join next week. I'm streaming on Wednesdays. And please subscribe to the channel, YouTube channel, Critical Discussions. Take a look at shorter videos. Take a look at longer videos. I am basically bringing you news about Russia, about Ukraine, translating to you certain news, certain information from Russian, so you can stay sort of slightly in the loop and understand better what's going on inside Russia. And yeah. Okay. And if you can, I would really appreciate if you can, again, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Twitch, maybe donate if you can. That always helps. And yeah, thank you very much. See you next one. Bye bye.